David always felt like a fish out of water in his own family. While everyone around him seemed to buzz with contagious energy, he preferred tranquility and introspection. His family was known in the neighborhood as the tireless partiers, a nickname that, for David, sounded more like a warning than a compliment. From a young age, David found himself fascinated by books, puzzles, and long solitary walks in the park. While his cousins ran around the house screaming and laughing during the endless family dinners, he would hide in the back room, immersed in a world of fantasy and imagination. His mother, Dolores, a woman with vibrant red hair and an even more striking personality, used to joke, "David, if you hadn't been born at home, I'd think you got switched at the hospital." But just one look at David's father, Carlos, would dispel any doubts about paternity. David was the spitting image of his father, the same thoughtful green eyes, slightly square chin, and even the way they furrowed their brows when concentrating. The difference was that Carlos, despite his serious appearance, was just as much a partier as the rest of the family. David's parents' house was a true entertainment hub. Located on a quiet street in a residential neighborhood, it stood out for its colorful facade and the constant comings and goings of people. The front yard, always well maintained, was the setting for impromptu barbecues and family gatherings that lasted until late hours. For David, it was like living in a perpetual carnival. When it finally came time to go to college, David saw his chance to escape. He was accepted into a prestigious university on the other side of the country, and for the first time in his life, he felt he could breathe. The campus was an oasis of tranquility compared to his home. Quiet dorms, cozy libraries, and inviting cafes became his new havens. During those years, David flourished. He made friends who shared his interests, dove into fascinating studies, and began to build his own identity, away from the exuberant shadow of his family. His clothes, previously colorful due to his mother's insistence, gave way to neutral and discreet tones. His room in the dorm was a study in minimalism, so different from the joyful chaos of his childhood home. However, fate seemed to have other plans for David. Shortly after graduating, he received an irresistible job offer in his hometown. Initially, he hesitated. The idea of returning to the family whirlwind scared him. But the professional opportunity was too good to pass up, and so with a mix of anticipation and apprehension, David packed his bags and returned home. The readaptation was challenging. David rented a small apartment, determined to keep some distance from the family madness. But it was hard to escape completely. The invitations for dinners, parties, and spontaneous gatherings were constant. He found himself frequently making up excuses, feeling guilty, but at the same time relieved to maintain his peace. On a seemingly ordinary Wednesday, David woke up with a throbbing toothache. His uncle Marco, the family dentist, had an office downtown. Reluctant, but with no other option, David made an appointment for that morning. The building where the office was located was one of those generic commercial buildings, glass and concrete, nothing memorable. David entered the lobby, heading for the elevator. He was about to press the button when he heard hurried footsteps. "Wait, please!" a female voice shouted. David held the elevator door, allowing a breathless young woman to enter. She smiled, grateful, and David felt something strange in his stomach. The girl was beautiful, with wavy brown hair and honey-colored eyes. But it wasn't just her beauty that struck him. There was something more, something familiar, and at the same time new. "Thank you," she said, still catching her breath. "I thought I was going to be late." David nodded, trying not to stare too obviously. The elevator began to ascend, and for a moment there was silence. Then, with an alarming jolt, it stopped. The lights flickered, and David felt the elevator sway slightly. His heart raced, but he remained calm. The girl beside him, however, visibly paled. "Oh no, oh no," she murmured, her eyes wide with fear. David, surprising himself, gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's all right," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. I'll call for help." He pressed the emergency button, and soon a metallic voice sounded over the intercom. "Please remain calm. A maintenance team is on its way. You are safe." The girl took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "Sorry," she said with a shaky smile. "I'm a bit claustrophobic. I'm Hillary, by the way." "David," he introduced himself, "and don't worry, we'll get out of here soon." To distract Hillary and himself, David started talking. To his surprise, he found it easy to talk to her. Hillary was outgoing and chatty, effortlessly transitioning from one topic to another in a way that reminded David of his own family. As time went by, David couldn't help but notice the similarities between Hillary and the people he had always tried to avoid. She gestured animatedly as she spoke. Her laughter was loud and contagious, and her clothes, a bright floral dress with red high-heeled shoes, were exactly the sort of thing the women in his family would love. But strangely, instead of feeling exhausted or irritated, David found himself fascinated. Hillary's energy was different somehow. It was captivating, refreshing. He caught himself laughing at her jokes, interested in her stories, and wanting to know more about her. After 2 hours that seemed to fly by, the elevator doors finally opened. Technicians and building security greeted them, asking questions and offering water. In the commotion, David and Hillary were separated. By the time he finally managed to get away from the insistent rescuers, Hillary had already left. In the days that followed, David couldn't get Hillary out of his mind. He found himself recalling details of the conversation, the sound of her laughter, the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about something that excited her. At night, he dreamed of her, vivid and happy dreams that left him with a feeling of loss upon waking. He wondered if it was possible to fall in love with someone in such a short time. The idea seemed absurd, like something out of a romantic movie his mother would love. But there was no denying what he felt. The problem was how to find her again. In the rush and confusion of being rescued, they hadn't exchanged phone numbers or last names. All David knew was her first name, and that she had an appointment somewhere in that building that day. He considered going back there and asking for her, but the idea seemed too desperate. A week after the elevator incident, David received a call from his mother. "David, dear, we have a special dinner tonight. Your cousin Peter got a promotion at work." David sighed. "Mum, today is Wednesday. Why don't you all do these celebrations on the weekends?" "Oh, David, don't be grumpy," his mother replied, the joy in her voice unwavering. "You know how we like to celebrate the good things in life. Your cousin is so happy. Come, let's celebrate together." Resigned, David agreed to go. He planned to make a quick appearance, greet his cousin, eat a bit, and leave before the party got too lively. He dressed in his usual clothes, dark jeans and a grey button-down shirt, and drove to his parents' house. Upon arrival, the familiar scene greeted him. Cars parked all along the street, lights on in every window, the sound of laughter and music escaping through the cracks. David took a deep breath, mentally preparing himself, and entered. The house was crowded, as always. Uncles, cousins, neighbours and family friends filled every room. Children ran between the adults' legs, chasing each other and laughing. In the kitchen, his mother coordinated an army of helpers, all carrying plates and dishes. David greeted people politely, making his way to the honoured cousin. Peter hugged him effusively, almost spilling the drink he was holding. "David, so glad you came. Come, have a beer with me." Resisting the temptation to decline, David accepted the drink and listened to Peter talk excitedly about his promotion. As the minutes passed, he felt the familiar sensation of discomfort growing. The noise, the people, everything seemed too much. Determined to leave, David began to say his goodbyes discreetly. He was almost at the front door, the car keys already in hand, when someone entered. Time seemed to stop. There, standing on the doorstep, was Hillary. The same Hillary from the elevator, the Hillary of his dreams. She was wearing a bright blue dress and carrying a bottle of wine. Their eyes met, and both were left open-mouthed with surprise. "Hillary, dear, so glad you came." Dolores's voice sounded from the kitchen. David's mother appeared, drying her hands on a dish towel, and hugged Hillary warmly. Then, noticing David standing there, she smiled. "Oh, David, have you met our new neighbour? Hilary moved into the house next door last week. I invited her to join us tonight." David and Hilary exchanged a glance, a smile of recognition forming on their faces. "Actually, Mom," David said without taking his eyes off Hilary, "we've already met." "Oh, how wonderful," Dolores exclaimed. Then, noticing the keys in David's hand, she frowned. "Were you going out, son?" David hesitated for a moment, looking from the keys to Hilary. Something inside him changed at that moment. The idea of leaving, of missing the chance to spend more time with Hilary, seemed absurd now. "No, Mum," he finally said, putting the keys back in his pocket. "I've decided to stay a little longer." The smile Hilary gave him made his heart race. Dolores, satisfied, returned to the kitchen, leaving the two of them alone in the entrance. "Then," Hilary said, her eyes sparkling with amusement, "I guess we were destined to meet again." David laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. "It seems so. Who would have thought you would be my parents' new neighbour?" The evening that followed was a revelation for David. He and Hilary spent hours talking, laughing, and getting to know each other better. Watching Hilary interact with his family was a fascinating experience. She fit in perfectly, laughing at Uncle Marco's jokes, discussing recipes with his grandmother, and even joining his younger cousins in an impromptu dance competition. The most surprising thing for David was how he felt throughout it all. Instead of the usual urge to escape, he found himself wanting to stay, wanting to be a part of it. Hilary's energy was contagious, but in a way that energized him rather than drained him. As the night progressed, David began to see his family through new eyes. What he once perceived as excessive noise now seemed like genuine joy. The constant need to be together, which he found suffocating, now appeared to be a demonstration of love and unity. Hilary smiled gently. "Your family is amazing," she said, as they watched the joyful chaos in the living room. "You are very lucky." David nodded, feeling a wave of affection for all those noisy and extravagant people. "I guess I am," he admitted. "Sometimes it's hard to see that when you're in the middle of it all." "Sometimes we need a different perspective," Hilary replied, intertwining her fingers with his. At that moment, David realized that he had found something precious, not just in Hilary, but in a newfound appreciation for his family and his origins. He, who always thought he needed to run away to find himself, discovered that his true self had been there all along, waiting to be embraced. In the months and years that followed, David and Hilary became inseparable. Their relationship flourished. Eventually they got married, in a ceremony that, to everyone's joy, was as lively and full of life as any of David's family gatherings. To the surprise of many, and perhaps most of all to himself, David became a constant presence at family dinners and celebrations. He learned to appreciate the chaos, to laugh at the eccentricities, and to value the bonds that united them. Hilary, with her energy and love of life, was the bridge David needed to reconnect with his roots. Together they created a life that balanced the exuberance of David's family with moments of tranquility and introspection. Their home became a haven where both sides of David could coexist harmoniously, a place of laughter and parties, but also of quietness and reflection. And so, David, who once believed that happiness lay in escaping his origins, discovered that his true home was exactly where it had always been, in the heart of a noisy, loving, and absolutely unique family. With Hilary by his side, he finally understood that he didn't need to choose between who he was and where he came from. He could embrace both, creating a rich and multifaceted identity that was truly his own. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.